The scent of damp earth and possibility always hung heavy in my studio, a comforting blanket that had been my constant for years. It was a space where the world outside faded, where the rhythmic hum of the pottery wheel was the loudest sound, and the only chaos was the beautiful, unpredictable dance of clay transforming under my hands. My name is Nicole, and for as long as I could remember, this studio, with its shelves lined with unfired bisque and glazed masterpieces, had been my sanctuary. I liked order, the predictability of the kiln's firing schedule, the precise weight of a freshly wedged lump of clay. It was a mirror to my own life, carefully crafted, meticulously maintained, with no room for unexpected cracks or dramatic collapses. It was a Tuesday evening, a steady drizzle tapping against the large studio windows. The overhead lights cast a warm glow on the workbenches, illuminating the fine dust that always seemed to settle on every surface, a testament to the endless creation happening here. My class was due to start, and I was, as always, meticulously arranging tools, ensuring each piece of clay was perfectly centered on its bat. A small group of regulars trickled in, their familiar faces and comfortable banter a part of the studio's rhythm. We exchanged pleasantries, the easy camaraderie of shared passion. I moved among them, offering quiet guidance, my hands instinctively correcting a posture here, refining a curve there. Then the door opened again, and the world, or at least my carefully curated corner of it, shifted on its axis. She entered like a splash of vibrant color in a monochromatic painting. Penelope. My first thought was how utterly out of place she seemed in the quiet, earthy confines of my studio, and yet, simultaneously, how utterly captivating. She wasn't just walking in, she was arriving. Her hair, a cascade of sun-kissed waves, seemed to catch every available light, framing a face that was all sharp angles and soft curves, punctuated by eyes that sparkled with an almost reckless vivacity. They were a startling shade of green, like moss after a spring rain, and they held a playful curiosity that immediately snagged my attention. She wore a fitted denim jacket over a floral dress that somehow managed to be both delicate and audacious, an unlikely pairing that she pulled off with effortless grace. A small, silver ink pendant rested at her collarbone, glinting as she moved. She carried herself with an easy confidence, a natural magnetism that drew every eye in the room, including mine. Her gaze swept over the studio, lingering for a moment on the kiln, then the row of finished pieces, before finally settling on me. A slow, disarming smile spread across her face, and a dimple appeared at the corner of her mouth, adding another layer of charm to an already overwhelming presence. "Hi," she said, her voice a low, melodic alto that seemed to hum through the air. "Is this the beginner's pottery class?" I found myself momentarily speechless, a rare occurrence. My usual calm, professional response seemed to have evaporated somewhere between her entrance and her smile. "Yes," I managed, my voice a little stiffer than I intended. "Welcome. I'm Nicole, your instructor." "Penelope," she replied, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, warm, and surprisingly soft. Her fingers, long and elegant, seemed to know instinctively how to hold, how to connect. I felt a jolt, a spark of something unfamiliar, as our skin touched. It lingered, just a beat too long, before we both withdrew. I gestured to an empty wheel. "You can set up over there. There's a fresh block of clay for you." She moved with an almost dancer-like fluidity, her every motion fluid and graceful. As she settled onto the stool, her green eyes met mine again, and this time, there was a knowing glint, a silent challenge that made a strange flutter ignite in my chest. It was unsettling, this immediate, undeniable intrusion into my carefully constructed sense of calm. I was used to being the observer, the teacher, the guide. Penelope, however, looked at me as if I were the one to be observed, perhaps even unraveled. Throughout the initial demonstration, I found my gaze drifting towards her more often than I would have liked. She watched me with an intense focus, her head tilted slightly, a small, intrigued smile playing on her lips. When she finally got her hands on the clay, it was a beautiful, chaotic mess. Unlike the cautious attempts of most beginners, Penelope dove in with unbridled enthusiasm, her fingers pressing, pulling, and shaping with an almost reckless abandon. Clay splattered onto her dress, streaked her hands, and even smudged her cheek, but she laughed it off, her joy infectious. "Is this right?" she asked once, holding up a lopsided, wobbling cylinder that resembled a melted candle more than a pot. Her eyes, however, sparkled with genuine pride. I walked over, feigning a professional assessment. "Well," I began, a small smile tugging at my lips, "it certainly has character." I reached out, my fingers hovering over her work, guiding her hands. "Let's try to center it a little more. You need a firm, steady pressure here, like this." My thumb brushed against the back of her hand, and the contact was instantaneous, a quiet warmth spreading through me. Her skin was surprisingly soft, almost delicate, beneath the rough texture of the clay. She nodded, her gaze fixed on our joined hands, then slowly lifting to meet mine. The air thickened, charged with a subtle current that was entirely new to me. There was a directness in her gaze, an almost audacious openness that left me breathless. It was as if she saw right through my carefully maintained facade, past the teacher, and into something deeper, something I had long kept hidden, even from myself. I quickly pulled my hands away, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "Keep practicing," I said, my voice perhaps a little too brusque. I turned away, the image of her vibrant eyes and that knowing smile burned into my mind. Penelope, with her effortless charm and unsettling directness, was a crack in the carefully constructed walls of my life, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to patch it up or let it crumble. I dismissed the feeling as mere annoyance, a professional curiosity about a particularly spirited student. Yet, as I walked back to my wheel, a strange, undeniable pull tugged at me, a flicker of something new and undeniably intriguing. My sanctuary, it seemed, had just welcomed a most unexpected visitor. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm, though a subtly altered one. Penelope became a constant presence in the Tuesday evening class, her vibrant energy a magnetic force I found increasingly difficult to ignore. My initial dismissive feelings morphed into something more complex, a mixture of professional exasperation and an undeniable, inconvenient fascination. She was consistently enthusiastic, often the last to leave, her hands perpetually caked in clay. Her progress, while still retaining a certain wild abandon, was remarkable. She approached each piece with a joyful fearlessness that was both admirable and, for my structured sensibilities, slightly unnerving. While others painstakingly measured and fretted, Penelope simply created, guided by an instinct that seemed foreign yet alluring. Our interactions in class, though outwardly professional, were subtly charged. She had a way of seeking my guidance that always felt a little too intimate. "Nicole," she'd call out, her voice a warm invitation. "My pot looks like it's trying to escape the wheel. Can you work your magic?" I'd approach her station, a familiar tension tightening in my shoulders. As I demonstrated the correct technique, my hands guiding hers on the spinning clay, the contact was always prolonged. Her fingers, still soft despite the rough material, would press against mine, and the warmth would seep into my skin, lingering long after I'd pulled away. I'd catch her watching our joined hands, then her gaze would slowly lift to meet mine, a knowing glint in her green eyes. There was an unspoken language there, a silent hum between us that grew more potent with each passing class. Penelope's friendliness was an art form in itself, subtle yet persistent. It wasn't overt, no grand gestures that would overtly cross a professional line. Instead, it was in the lingering eye contact across the room when she thought I wasn't looking, a soft, almost imperceptible lean into my personal space when I offered advice, the way her laughter seemed to ring a little clearer when I made a rare, dry joke. She'd make playful comments about my magical touch or my focused intensity when I demonstrated, her voice laced with an amused admiration that managed to fluster me every single time. My usual composure, my carefully cultivated professional demeanor, felt increasingly fragile under her persistent, gentle attention. I found myself catching glances of her when I thought she wasn't looking. The way her hair fell across her shoulder as she leaned over a piece, the focused intensity in her brow when she was truly engrossed, the easy smile she shared with other students. A new kind of awareness was stirring within me, a quiet hum that resonated deep in my chest. I would quickly avert my eyes, chiding myself for the unprofessional distraction, yet the images would remain, replaying in my mind long after class ended. One Tuesday evening, the studio slowly emptied. The gentle clatter of tools being cleaned, the low murmur of goodbyes, faded into the soft hum of the ventilation system. I was in the back, meticulously cleaning brushes, when I noticed Penelope was still at her wheel, a solitary figure under the fading light. She was hunched over a piece, her brow furrowed in concentration, but there was a palpable sense of frustration radiating from her. "Having trouble, Penelope?" I asked, my voice cutting through the quiet. She jumped, startled, then turned to me with a wry smile. "Nicole, didn't hear you there. Yeah, this piece just isn't cooperating. It's supposed to be a vase, but it's decided it wants to be a melted marshmallow." She gestured to the sad, collapsing form on her wheel, a rare moment of defeat in her usual buoyant demeanor. I walked over, my movements slow, deliberate. The studio was almost entirely silent now, the outside world muffled by the thick walls. The soft light from the overhead fixtures cast long shadows, creating an intimate, almost dreamlike atmosphere. I stood beside her, observing the misshapen clay. "It happens," I said, my voice softer than usual. "Sometimes the clay has its own ideas. Or maybe," I added, a small, genuine smile gracing my lips, "we just haven't convinced it otherwise." She chuckled, a low, rich sound that always seemed to find a direct path to my core. "Well, you always seem to convince it. Your pieces are so graceful. They look like they were always meant to be." I felt a warmth spread through me at her words, a genuine appreciation that was rare and comforting. "It takes practice, Penelope. And patience." I reached out, my fingers hovering over the clay, then gently cupping her hands, guiding them to the base of the piece. "You need to feel the clay, anticipate its movement. Slow and steady like this." Our hands were fully intertwined now, my palms pressed against hers, guiding her fingers as the wheel spun slowly. The warmth from her skin seeped into mine, a familiar, yet increasingly potent sensation. Her breath hitched slightly, and I felt her body subtly lean into mine, a silent acceptance of the closeness. The air between us was thick, heavy with unspoken words, with the quiet understanding of shared touch and focused intent. "There," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the soft whir of the wheel. The piece, still imperfect, had found a newfound stability. I started to pull away, but her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around mine, holding me there. "Your hands," she murmured, her voice a low, husky whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. Her green eyes, now dark and luminous in the muted light, locked onto mine. "They're beautiful, Nicole. So strong, so precise." The compliment, so simple, so direct, hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't about the clay, not really.
It was about me.
The words, laced with an undeniable warmth, stripped away a layer of my carefully constructed professionalism, leaving me exposed. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a dizzying flush creep up my neck. Her gaze was intense, unwavering, reading something in my eyes that I hadn't even consciously acknowledged myself. It was a dizzying, terrifying, exhilarating moment, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt utterly, beautifully, completely undone. The words, "Your hands, they're beautiful, Nicole," hung in the air, a silent echo in the hushed studio. Penelope's voice, a low, intimate murmur, had ignited something within me, a spark that quickly threatened to blaze into an inferno. Her eyes, those startling green pools, held mine captive, mirroring a question, a longing, that I hadn't dared to articulate even to myself. My carefully constructed composure, usually as solid as a fired pot, felt like wet clay, malleable, and on the verge of collapsing. I should have pulled away. I should have offered a polite, professional deflection, reminded her of the time, the need to clean up. But I couldn't. My body, usually so responsive to my will, remained rooted to the spot, held captive by the magnetic pull between us. The studio, once my sanctuary, felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken connection. The whir of the dormant pottery wheel, the distant hum of the kiln, all faded into a dull background thrum, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breath. Penelope's gaze dropped from my eyes to my lips, a deliberate, slow journey that sent a shiver down my spine. A delicate blush colored her cheeks, a subtle hint of vulnerability beneath her usual audacious charm. Her fingers, still intertwined with mine, tightened almost imperceptibly, a silent invitation, a silent plea. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to lean in. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. Every instinct screamed for me to retreat, to maintain the professional distance, to guard the fragile walls I had built around myself. But another, more primal instinct, a curiosity I hadn't known I possessed, urged me forward, drawn to the inevitable. Her hand, still smudged with clay, gently rose from our intertwined fingers and rested lightly on my cheek. The rough texture against my skin was a stark contrast to the surprising tenderness of her touch. Her thumb moved softly over my jawline, a light brush that sent prickles of heat through me. Her eyes, now only inches from mine, were wide, luminous, searching. There was no coyness, no games, only a raw, potent openness that mirrored the burgeoning feeling in my own chest. "Nicole," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a breath against my lips. And then she closed the small distance between us. Her lips, soft and hesitant at first, pressed against mine. It wasn't a forceful kiss, not demanding, but a gentle, inquisitive touch that was infinitely more potent. It was electric, disorienting, a sudden jolt that sent a shockwave through every nerve ending in my body. The scent of clay, of her perfume, of something wild and exhilarating, filled my senses. My mind, usually so clear and analytical, fractured into 1,000 shimmering pieces. I felt myself respond, a soft gasp escaping my throat as my lips parted slightly under hers. The kiss deepened, becoming more confident, more steady. Her free hand moved to the back of my neck, a light touch that brought us closer, erasing any remaining space between us. I tasted a hint of mint, of something sweet and intoxicating, and an unfamiliar curiosity roared to life within me. It was a kiss that promised discovery, a plunge into uncharted emotional waters. Then, just as quickly as it began, it ended. Penelope pulled back, a soft, breathless sound escaping her lips. My eyes fluttered open, disoriented, my chest heaving. The studio, which had momentarily ceased to exist, slowly came back into focus, the quiet hum of the kiln suddenly deafening. Her face, flushed and beautiful, was inches from mine, her green eyes wide with a mixture of exhilaration and something akin to trepidation. A small, almost apologetic smile, a hint of vulnerability beneath her usual boldness, played on her lips. She began, her voice hoarse, but no more words came. She bit her lip, her gaze dropping from mine to the floor, as if suddenly shy, suddenly unsure. My mind, still reeling, was a chaotic storm. Unease and exhilaration clashed, a brutal internal battle. The audacity of her actions, the sheer unexpectedness of it, was overwhelming. My body still thrummed with the aftershocks of the kiss, a tingling warmth spreading from my lips through every inch of my being. This was new territory, unplanned and exhilarating in equal measure. I took a shaky step back, then another, creating a physical distance that I desperately needed to match the emotional chasm that had just opened up. My breath was still ragged, my heart still racing. I couldn't look at her, not really. The intensity of her gaze, the silent question in her eyes, was too much. I have to go. I managed, my voice a strangled whisper. I grabbed my bag, my movements clumsy and uncoordinated. I didn't wait for a response, didn't dare to meet her gaze again. I practically fled the studio, the heavy door closing behind me with a decisive thud, leaving Penelope alone in the quiet, charged space. The walk home was a blur. My mind replayed the scene over and over. Her approach, her touch, the warmth of her lips on mine. The image of her face, flushed and vulnerable, her eyes dark with feeling, was burned into my memory. Every sensation, every stolen breath, every beat of my frantic heart resonated within me. Alone in my apartment, the quiet usually so comforting, now felt suffocating. I paced, my thoughts a frantic, tangled mess. The kiss had shattered my carefully maintained composure, shattering the illusion of control I had meticulously cultivated for years. It challenged everything I thought I knew about myself, about my feelings, about the safe, predictable path I had always chosen. This was chaos, pure and unadulterated, and it was undeniably, terrifyingly, exquisitely alluring. A part of me, a deeply buried part, yearned for more, for that audacious touch, that knowing gaze. But another part, the part that had built walls around a past of unspoken hurts, recoiled in fear. This was unplanned. This was unfamiliar. And I was utterly, beautifully, completely lost in the aftermath of its intoxicating fire. The days that followed the kiss were a strange, distorted reality. My studio, once a place of comfort and clarity, now felt charged with the lingering ghost of Penelope's touch, the phantom scent of her presence. I tried to immerse myself in my work, to find solace in the familiar rhythm of the wheel, but my focus was fractured. The image of her face, illuminated by the studio lights, her lips soft against mine, replayed in an endless, tormenting loop. I did what I always did when faced with overwhelming emotion. I retreated. I maintained a professional distance, bordering on outright avoidance. When Tuesday evening rolled around again, I braced myself. I arrived early, setting up with an almost frantic efficiency, trying to project an air of impenetrable calm. Penelope arrived, as usual, a few minutes before class. She walked in with her usual graceful confidence, but her eyes, when they met mine across the room, held a new, quiet intensity, a question mixed with an almost imperceptible hint of hurt. I offered a curt, professional greeting, then immediately busied myself with a student's project, keeping my back mostly turned to her. Throughout the class, I felt her gaze on me, a constant, warm pressure against my skin. I avoided making eye contact, my answers to her questions brief and to the point. My hands, usually so steady, shook slightly as I demonstrated a technique. The air between us was thick, heavy with unspoken words, with the memory of that electrifying moment. But Penelope, I quickly learned, was not easily deterred. My avoidance, my professional facade, seemed only to fuel her quiet persistence. She didn't press, didn't overtly challenge my boundaries, but her actions spoke volumes. I'd find small, thoughtful gestures left for me. One morning, tucked among the glazes on my workbench, I discovered a perfectly sculpted mini vase, no bigger than my thumb, fired to a delicate bisque. Its surface was smooth, the shape elegant, a testament to her growing skill. Attached was a small, folded note, simply inscribed with the words, "A small thank you for your beautiful hands." The words, echoing her compliment from that evening, sent a familiar rush of heat through me. Another time, after a particularly challenging class where I'd felt overwhelmed, I found a small, smooth river stone on my chair, polished to a comforting sheen. There was no note, no explanation, just the quiet gesture of understanding. It was as if she knew, intuitively, when I needed a subtle reassurance, a gentle reminder of her presence. These small acts chipped away at my resolve, at the walls I was so desperately trying to rebuild. They were silent conversations, a testament to her perceptive nature, her ability to see beyond my guarded exterior. I found myself looking for them, a strange mixture of apprehension and anticipation swirling within me. One afternoon, a few weeks after the kiss, I was alone in the studio, preparing for the next class. The kiln hummed softly, a comforting drone that usually soothed my nerves. Today, it only highlighted the quiet ache in my chest. I was meticulously wiping down the wheels, trying to impose order on the internal chaos, when the studio door creaked open. It was Penelope. She wasn't dressed in her usual vibrant array, but in soft jeans and a simple, fitted sweater that somehow made her look both more approachable and more compelling. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, revealing the delicate curve of her neck. "Nicole," she said, her voice soft, tentative. I straightened up, my heart immediately leaping into my throat. I turned, my hands still gripping the damp cloth, a defensive posture I hadn't consciously adopted. "Penelope, class isn't for another hour." She walked further into the studio, her movements slow and deliberate, closing the door softly behind her. The sound echoed in the quiet space, sealing us in. She stopped a few feet from me, her green eyes, serious and direct, holding mine. There was no playfulness now, only a quiet resolve. "I know," she replied, her voice steady. "I came early because we need to talk." My stomach clenched. This was it. The conversation I had been dreading and secretly, desperately, craving. About what? I asked, my voice thin, betraying the turmoil within. "You know about what?" she said, her gaze unwavering. "About that night. About the kiss." I flinched, the word hanging heavy in the air. "Penelope, I think it was a mistake. An impulse. We're instructor and student, and it's not appropriate." The words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to cling to the professional script I had always followed. She took a slow, deliberate step closer. "Was it a mistake, Nicole? Or was it just unexpected?" Her voice was gentle, almost a whisper, but it carried an undeniable strength. Because to me, it felt like a revelation. I swallowed hard, her honesty a sharp blade piercing through my defenses. I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" She took another step, closing the distance between us until she was only an arm's length away. Her eyes searched mine, deep and understanding. "You felt it too, Nicole. Don't deny it. That spark, that something between us. I've felt it since the moment I walked into the studio. And you, with your quiet strength, your beautiful hands, you drew me in." Her words, so direct, so earnest, bypassed my logical mind and went straight to my heart. The ache in my chest intensified, a bittersweet mix of fear and longing. No one had ever spoken to me with such raw honesty, such unvarnished openness. "I know this is unconventional," she continued, her voice softening. "And I know you're guarded. I see it. But I also see something incredible underneath, something I want to know more about. I want to know you, Nicole. Not just the pottery instructor, but the woman who feels things so deeply, the woman who I can't stop thinking about." Her gaze was unwavering, her sincerity palpable. It was a confession, an offering laid bare between us. My carefully constructed walls, fortified over years of unspoken hurts, felt like they were crumbling around me. Her words chipped away at my emotional armor, revealing glimpses of a yearning I had long suppressed. A strange tremor of something akin to hope, fragile yet persistent, ran through me. But alongside it, a profound, terrifying fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of vulnerability, fear of a past that whispered warnings of heartache. But in her eyes, in her earnest plea, I saw a reflection of a feeling I could no longer deny. Penelope's confession hung in the air, a delicate, potent thing. Her green eyes, earnest and vulnerable, held mine, daring me to deny the truth of her words, the truth that resonated deep within my own guarded heart. My usual retreat, my practiced dismissal, felt impossible in the face of her raw honesty. She didn't press, didn't demand an answer, but simply stood there, an open book, waiting. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken emotions. My mind raced, grappling with the audacity of her pursuit, the terrifying allure of her directness. It was a stark contrast to my own cautious nature, a disorienting challenge to the carefully structured life I had built. Yet, beneath the fear, a flicker of something new, something hopeful, ignited within me. I can't. I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. Not because I didn't want to, but because the magnitude of what she was suggesting felt too overwhelming. This is too much, Penelope. I don't. She took another slow step forward, reaching out a hand, not to touch me, but to simply gesture towards the studio around us. Nicole, look at what you do here. You take something raw, shapeless, and you transform it into something beautiful, something enduring. You don't shy away from the mess, do you? You lean into it, you mold it. Her gaze returned to mine, gentle but firm. Why can't you do that with this? With us? Her analogy, drawing from my own craft, was disarmingly effective. It bypassed my rational defenses, appealing directly to the artist within me. The idea of molding this unexpected, chaotic connection felt intriguing, even seductive. Just one step, she continued, her voice soft, coaxing. Not a leap, a small step. Would you meet me for coffee? Outside of here. No clay, no lessons, just talk. The offer was so simple, so disarmingly ordinary, yet it felt like agreeing to jump off a cliff. My internal conflict raged. The sensible part of me screamed no, warned against the uncharted territory. But another part, the part that had felt that electric spark, that undeniable pull, whispered yes. It was a chance, a delicate thread of possibility. Okay, I heard myself say, the word surprising even me. It came out hesitant, almost a breath.
Coffee.
But just coffee. A genuine, radiant smile broke across Penelope's face, lighting up her eyes with an almost childlike joy.
Coffee it is.
How about Saturday? There's a small gallery downtown that has an amazing little cafe. It's quiet. Saturday felt like an eternity away, yet it arrived with bewildering speed. I found myself obsessing over my outfit, a trivial concern for someone who usually prioritized comfort and practicality. I settled on a dark, fitted sweater and tailored trousers, professional yet soft, a compromise between my desire for distance and a burgeoning, unfamiliar hope. The gallery cafe was indeed quiet, bathed in the soft, diffused light filtering through large windows. Abstract art adorned the walls, vibrant colors clashing and blending, a perfect backdrop for the unspoken tension humming between us. Penelope was already there, seated at a small, unassuming table, nursing a latte. She looked effortlessly chic in a loose, flowing dress in shades of deep blue and emerald green that somehow echoed the color of her eyes. Her hair was down, a soft halo around her face, and as she looked up and saw me, her smile was warm and genuine, devoid of any hint of the playful teasing she often displayed in the studio. "Nicole," she greeted, rising slightly as I approached. "Glad you came." Her voice was soft, laced with a genuine sincerity that immediately put me a little more at ease. "You too," I replied, sitting opposite her. The small table felt like a vast expanse, yet the intimacy of the setting was undeniable. We ordered, the mundane act a small anchor in the sea of my nervous anticipation. The conversation started slowly, carefully. We talked about art, about the pieces on the walls, about the creative process. Penelope, it turned out, had a surprisingly insightful take on abstract expressionism, her observations sharp and articulate. She spoke of how art, like life, was about embracing the imperfect, finding beauty in the unexpected. I found myself relaxing, drawn into her passionate perspective, surprised by the depth of her thoughts beyond her vivacious exterior. Then, gradually, the conversation shifted. Penelope spoke of her own life, of an upbringing that was less conventional than mine, filled with travel and artistic pursuits, but also marked by a certain rootlessness. She spoke of a longing for connection, for a place to truly belong. Her voice, usually so confident, held a quiet vulnerability that resonated deeply with something in my own experience. I think that's why I love pottery so much, she confessed, her gaze falling to her hands, which rested clasped on the table. It's about grounding, about creating something tangible, something that stays, something that has roots. She looked up, her green eyes earnest. I guess I'm looking for my roots. Her honesty disarmed me completely. It was a mirror to my own quiet search for stability, for a sense of belonging that had been shaken by past hurts I rarely acknowledged. Emboldened by her openness, I found myself, for the first time in years, speaking of my own guarded history. Not in full detail, not yet, but in fragments, hints of a past that had taught me to build walls, to guard my heart fiercely. I spoke of a quiet childhood, of a disappointment that had left a lasting mark, of a learned self-reliance that sometimes felt like a lonely burden. It was terrifying, this unveiling, but with each shared word, a subtle weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. Penelope listened intently, her gaze unwavering, offering no judgment, only a profound understanding. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix anything, but simply absorbed my words, her quiet presence a comforting balm. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the gallery floor, our cups sat empty between us. The initial tension had melted away, replaced by a comfortable, profound intimacy. This was more than just coffee. It was a delicate exploration, a mapping of new emotional landscapes. When it was time to leave, we stood by the entrance. The air crackled again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the volatile charge of the kiss, but a soft, warm hum of shared understanding. Penelope didn't attempt another kiss, didn't push for anything more. Instead, she simply reached out, her fingers gently brushing against my hand, a subtle, lingering touch that spoke volumes. Her green eyes held mine, a silent question, a promise, a profound tenderness. "Thank you for coming, Nicole," she murmured, her voice soft. "I really enjoyed this." "Me too," I replied, the words feeling utterly insufficient for the depth of emotion stirring within me. As I walked away from the gallery, the city noise seemed muted, the world around me infused with a quiet wonder. A sense of lightness, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, replaced my usual apprehension. The delicate thread of possibility had strengthened, and for the first time, I allowed myself to truly feel its pull. The coffee date marked a turning point, a delicate shift in the landscape of my life. The air between Penelope and me, once thick with unspoken tension, now hummed with a different kind of energy, a quiet understanding, a burgeoning closeness. My walls, though still present, felt less formidable, chipped away by her persistent kindness and the surprising vulnerability she had shown. We continued our classes, but the dynamic had irrevocably changed. Our interactions were no longer just professional, they were infused with a new layer of shared meaning. Penelope's playful friendliness softened into genuine affection, expressed in lingering glances, a hand gently resting on my arm as she laughed at one of my dry observations, or a thoughtful question about my day. I, in turn, found myself responding, my rigid composure slowly thawing. I caught myself smiling more, my quiet humor finding a willing audience in her. Our conversations extended beyond the studio, morphing into evening texts about a new art exhibit, a shared article on ceramics, or simply a mundane detail of our days that somehow felt profoundly important. I learned more about her adventurous spirit, her love for spontaneous road trips, her eclectic taste in music. She, in turn, learned about my quiet routines, my love for solitary walks, the specific shade of blue I found most comforting. I found myself drawn to her ability to find joy in small moments, her vibrant enthusiasm a refreshing contrast to my own measured existence. Penelope's unwavering support also began to unlock something deeper within me. She had an uncanny ability to read my unspoken emotions, to sense my moments of quiet struggle. When a challenging piece in the studio frustrated me, she'd approach, not with advice, but with a quiet presence, a gentle touch on my shoulder that conveyed profound empathy. Her genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings was a healing balm, slowly chipping away at the long-held belief that I had to face everything alone. The air between us, heavy with unexpressed connection since that first kiss, grew thick with a different kind of longing. It was a yearning born of shared laughter, deep conversations, and the burgeoning trust that was weaving itself into the fabric of our connection. The pull between us, which had initially been startling and disorienting, now felt like a natural extension of our emotional bond, a quiet current running beneath the surface, waiting for its moment to break through. One evening, a few weeks after our cafe meeting, Penelope came over to my apartment for dinner. It was a simple meal, pasta, a fresh salad, but the atmosphere was anything but ordinary. My apartment, usually so quiet, felt alive with her presence. Her laughter filled the space, her gestures animated as she recounted a funny story from her day. I found myself watching her, captivated by the way the lamplight caught the golden highlights in her hair, the expressive movements of her hands as she spoke. As the evening wore on, the conversation softened, drifting into more intimate territory. We spoke of dreams, of fears, of the quiet hopes we harbored for the future. The initial awkwardness had completely vanished, replaced by a profound sense of ease and belonging. We were sitting on the sofa, a comfortable silence settling between us after a particularly deep conversation. The city sounds outside were muted, and the only light came from a single lamp, casting a warm, intimate glow. My heart was thrumming, a steady, insistent beat against my ribs. I could feel the warmth radiating from her body beside me, the subtle scent of her perfume a delicious distraction. She turned to me, her green eyes dark and luminous in the soft light, filled with an intensity that took my breath away. All playfulness was gone, replaced by a raw, potent openness that mirrored the feeling in my own chest. She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, her touch sending shivers down my spine. "Nicole," she whispered, her voice husky a mere breath.
I've wanted this.
All of it. Her gaze dropped to my lips, lingering there, a silent question, an undeniable invitation. My own heart pounded, a frantic rhythm. I didn't speak. I couldn't. All I could do was lean in, drawn by an irresistible force. Her lips met mine, soft and hesitant at first, then deepening with a slow, tender steadiness. It was a kiss born of weeks of unspoken longing, of burgeoning trust, of a feeling that had simmered beneath the surface for too long. My hands, which had been resting awkwardly in my lap, found their way to her waist, pulling her closer, a gentle embrace that felt right. The kiss deepened, becoming more warm, more sure. Her fingers tangled in my hair, a light touch that sent waves of gentle pleasure through me. My own hands rested on her back, a steady, reassuring presence. There was a quiet connection, an undeniable bond that had been awakened within me, a longing for closeness, for understanding, for the intimacy that only she seemed to evoke. It was a dance of hesitant exploration and growing warmth, each touch, each kiss a revelation. Later, sitting together, the city lights a distant glow outside my window, I felt a profound sense of peace. The closeness we shared, far from being just physical, felt like a healing balm, a true connection that transcended the boundaries I had built around myself for so long. Penelope's presence beside me was a comforting weight, a solid anchor in a world that had once felt so solitary. I traced the line of her jaw with my finger, her breathing soft and even as she rested against me. I felt a surge of unfamiliar, overwhelming affection, a tenderness that brought tears to my eyes. Looking at her, truly looking at her, I saw not just the vivacious, audacious woman who had crashed into my ordered life, but a kind, perceptive soul who had, with gentle persistence and unwavering honesty, managed to crack open my carefully guarded heart. This was new, terrifying, and utterly beautiful. I had spent years meticulously crafting my life, but with Penelope, I felt like I was finally, truly being fired. The weeks and months that followed were a whirlwind of profound change, a vibrant kaleidoscope of emotions I had long suppressed. Penelope, with her unwavering affection and perceptive understanding, became an anchor in my life, gently coaxing me to revisit the long-buried landscapes of my past. The closeness we shared, both emotional and occasional physical, created a safe harbor where I could finally confront the shadows that had dictated my cautious existence. One quiet evening, curled on the sofa in my apartment, the soft glow of the city lights filtering through the windows, I found myself speaking of the deep disappointment from my childhood, a broken promise, a quiet betrayal that had taught me to build walls around my heart, to trust only in the predictable rhythm of my own hands on clay. Penelope listened, her hand gently stroking my hair, offering no judgment, only a comforting presence. Her silent acceptance was more potent than any words of advice, allowing me to process the old wounds, to finally release the emotional baggage I had carried for so long. It was a slow, painful untangling, but with each shared memory, each tear I allowed myself to shed in her arms, a sense of lightness, a profound freedom, began to bloom within me. I started to understand that my desire for control, for rigid order, had been a shield, a protective shell against the vulnerability that true connection demanded. Our blossoming relationship, however, did not go unnoticed. The small world of the art studio, like any close-knit community, had its whispers. Curious glances, longer than necessary stares, and the subtle shift in some conversations when we entered a room together became part of our new reality. Most of my regulars were warm, genuinely happy for my newfound joy, but there were others whose polite smiles didn't quite reach their eyes, whose hushed tones spoke of subtle judgments. This connection, as some might have seen it, brought with it an unexpected social pressure. Initially, these subtle shifts made me recoil. The old fears of exposure, of not being accepted, flared up. But Penelope, ever the audacious spirit, met these challenges with a quiet defiance. She didn't seek confrontation, but she also didn't hide. Her hand would find mine under the table at a casual studio gathering. Her gaze would hold mine with an unmistakable warmth even as others watched. Her unwavering confidence in us became my shield, her strength my courage. I found a new resolve, a fierce protectiveness over the beautiful thing we were building. I wouldn't let external opinions dictate my happiness, not anymore. Penelope had shown me the courage to live authentically, and I refused to retreat into my old, solitary shell. One brisk autumn afternoon, Penelope and I stood side by side at a bustling local art fair. Our stall, brimming with our collaborative pieces, was a vibrant display of our shared journey. There were elegant, glazed bowls I had thrown, adorned with Penelope's whimsical, hand-painted designs. There were small, intricately sculpted figures she had created, each one unique and expressive, finished with my precise, subtle glazes. Each piece was a testament to our individual strengths, woven together into something greater, something uniquely us. I, Nicole, the once reserved pottery teacher, found myself engaging with strangers, speaking animatedly about our work, about the inspiration behind each piece. There was a lightness in my voice, a genuine warmth in my smile that had been absent for far too long. Penelope stood beside me, her arm gently looped through mine, her green eyes sparkling with pride as she watched me interact. This public affirmation of our relationship, of our shared passion, felt like a defiant celebration, a quiet triumph over the unspoken judgments and past fears. As the day wound down, the golden hour light painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I looked at Penelope. Her face was flushed from the cold, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled at a passing child. My heart swelled, a profound, undeniable affection filling every corner of my being. I reached out, my fingers gently tracing the silver ink pendant that still rested at her collarbone. "You know," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion, "I used to think my life was perfectly molded, perfectly fired. But it was just bisque. You, Penelope, you're the glaze. You've brought out all the color, all the light. You've made me a masterpiece." She leaned into my touch, her eyes meeting mine, brimming with tenderness. "And you, Nicole," she whispered, her voice husky, You're the clay that held it all together. You're the strength, the foundation. You let me sculpt, you let me create. You let me find my roots. We stood there, amidst the joyful chaos of the art fair, hand in hand, a silent promise passing between us. My journey with Penelope had not only healed the deep, unspoken wounds of my past, but it had transformed me, fundamentally. I was no longer just the pottery instructor, the woman who valued order above all else. I was a woman who had dared to care, dared to be vulnerable, dared to embrace the beautiful, messy, unpredictable masterpiece that was my life, with the audacious, vibrant woman by my side. And as the last rays of sunlight touched our faces, I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in my soul, that this was just the beginning of our most extraordinary creation yet.